Oh,
Just reverse engineered. Thanks.
yeah.
I find out that the open telemetry workgroup is not always the last week of the month.
Hmm.
It's always the fourth week of the month, which is today.
So does it overlap with this one or?
No, it doesn't, but it overlaps with the AI workgroup, which is in about
Oh, yeah.
90.
Hi.
There's just three of us. Oh, it's early. It's just 1 minute after after 6.
Yeah, I think we have a few more people joining.
Hi.
Uh, I see.
Hello.
Yeah, Michael, you have to go alone to the AI work group. You have to join alone. I have
Okay.
open telemetry work group. I just
Oh
realized.
yeah, don't mind. I sent Claude.
Okay, I will do the cloud summary.
No, I won't.
But I'm super prepared because I just found out, and I'm sitting in a work group until the open telemetry work group starts.
One is oh, okay, come in. I was about to complain. There's still one missing. Okay.
Steven is missing.
Okay. Let's get started. So hi everyone. By being here, we all agree to the GraphQL spec membership agreements, the participation guideline, the contribution guide, the code of conduct. And we also agree that these videos can be published to YouTube. And we are using LLM tools to summarize these meetings. Let's start with a quick round of introductions. My name is Michael Stipe.
Hi, I'm Pascal.
I'm Martin from Apollo.
Hey, it's Derek here.
Oh, and often Derek. It's me, Camille from the guild.
I'm Sachin from Apollo, and my PR is too much.
I'm Steven. I work with Netflix.
Hi, Steven. Pull request. Awesome. Okay. So I have put 2 topics on here regarding deprecation. It came out of the discussion. I can maybe explain how we do deprecation, and maybe you guys are doing it differently. And then we can discuss maybe the approaches. And then there's the other thing we ran into, which is directive merging in general, and also with things like deprecated. And there are other things around deprecation, like if you think about requires opt-in, like there are system directives. There are also directives like tag and things. And then we can maybe go into that. Are there any other topics you guys want to discuss? No? Okay. Otherwise, if you think of something, just bring it up while we are talking. Okay. So we had a discussion internally because like there is this whole concept around shareability, right? Where you commit to something, that something is the same semantically. And there's this whole, we make you talk to each other, right? but for deprecation or for opt-ins and stuff like this, this doesn't happen, right? One team decides at the moment, and then it's either deprecated or an opt-in or whatever. Like, let's talk about concrete types. Let's have a subgraph A. And this has a product. And the product, I love AI. Okay, and this is not Go, actually GraphQL. Okay, let's have the similar type here, but this guy, shipping, wait, whatever. It also shares the name, right? And this is typically shareable. And ID is the key. Okay, so the way we handle that in Fusion is actually that we, the first one who deprecates a field says this is actually deprecated, deprecates it completely, right? So when we deprecate this, then also like it's one field to the outside, all right? We take the first deprecation and then it's gone. So the discussion that we had internally was that this is a steep cliff sometimes, where you're not forced to talk actually to others. You can just put the deprecated on there and then it's deprecated. And I was interested if there are other concepts around that and thoughts on this. Or is it not even a problem? Is that the expectation?
And I think that there might be a related issue here, which is like other properties that really belong to the field and not to a particular implementation of a field, like a description, for instance.
Yes, it goes in the same thing. It's also when you have colliding things, but that's good. Yeah, like it's in general for especially descriptions. What we already have in the spec is that we have the order. Not that we describe what order you have, but we, in essence, that there must be, the schemas must have a concrete and a stable order. So
But
that
that makes it deterministic, but not necessarily like insightful or something that like
exactly
developers can actually reason about.
Exactly, and there is no like. It could be that this other team has a very rubbish descriptions, and they just make it up for the whole graph because they are coming first. Same would be for deprecated. So there's no like coordination, or I don't know. There's no forced coordination at least.
Yeah, Stephen, do you do anything special for like description merging and things like deprecated?
So not really. It's but also our composition is it's still like it's based on the Fed one where you have a a type as a primary owner, and so that kind of lends a natural precedence. But still beyond that, like it's still sometimes surprising, like when what the behavior when you have multiple directives or a type is extended and there's a description on there. This area is still kind of ambiguous, really.
Yeah, also in your case, if you tombstone something, right?
Yeah,
it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the case of Tombstone, that is it's, if it's tombstone anywhere, then it's tombstone. And in general, that's the way we do directives. Is if someone puts a if any instance of a type has or of a field has a directive, then that field has the directive. Same for deprecated. But that's mostly just because that's how it was implemented, not because there was a whole lot of thought that went into it.
But is it a problem? You said, it's sometimes surprising. For me,
Well,
interesting would also be, is there a problem to be solved, or is it good as is?
Let's see. So for deprecated specifically,
it's actually for. I think this problem is really difficult to solve. But with deprecated, you have even a hard cliff that something happens, right? If you are, for instance, in clients, this field might not be shown anymore. Because default in graphical, for instance, they don't by default show deprecated fields. So it has an immediate effect onto your graph.
Yeah, it hasn't come up as a problem.
Okay.
But also, let's see. Well, I mean, so also for our for entities, every field can only be in one place as well on our graph. So it doesn't come into effect there. It would just be within a value type.
Okay.
And also most of when we do share value types across DGSs, across subgraphs, sorry, we use a common repo for those. So there's one source of truth. So really, yeah, and because of that, it actually just wouldn't come up very often for us.
Yeah, it's this combination of that one that you have ownership of types, and that you have shared value type library. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and also we don't do shareable fields on entities. The field only has one place. You can override it to move it from one subgraph to another, but you can't just have two definitions, or you can't have two places for the same field. So that makes it unambiguous in those cases there.
Yeah, that makes sense. In this case, this problem just doesn't exist. In your case,
yeah.
It actually starts existing when you have shareable, because then you can have two places that can change the definition of the thing, and then you can have competing things. I mean, you can always say that people have to talk to each other. It could also be that I mean, that would be the opposite of the thing.
But you would have it too, Michael, even without shareable, with the executable directives, right? Because they could differ between source schemas.
Executable?
Well, you still have the problem that directives may not be the same across different.
Yeah, but that is the second problem.
It's about you don't have the problem of deduplication, right? But you do have the problem there's three problems, I would say. You have the problem of deduplication on shareable fields for schema directives. Then you have merging of directives in general, and the third one is the distribution of directives of executable directives to subgraphs, right?
Yeah.
There you also have to know what do you do if you have a directive in two subgraphs, and then how do you split it and so on. So it's very complicated, this directive topic.
I mean, right now in federation, I guess, the Apollo implementation, the first one wins, right?
Well,
just to not have the issue with non.
No. In the Apollo Federation, as far as I looked in, was it has compose directive, which is only for type system directives.
Yeah, but that's for like directives. What I meant is also
Yeah.
descriptions. So it's first one seems
Descriptions,
like
yeah.
it, but it's not like it's not always the first one. It's just like there's some catches, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
the
It's
behavior, I think the docs of Apollo Federation reference say that the behavior for executable directive is different, but never say what the behavior is for
they do. There's a sec. But
you find it.
yeah, we looked
Remember
into
that in
it.
the call we didn't.
But let's not mix up. Okay, so for the descriptions, do we want to do something for this, or is it just accepted reality? That is the easiest thing to do.
I'm not sure there is like an easy solution to this
No,
problem.
they like otherwise we all would have one, right? It was just
Yeah. So I mean, but I mean, it's hard to sort of answer that question without knowing what the alternatives would be.
yeah. Yeah, my foray into this today was just like, do you guys also have better ideas? Because sometimes, like, yeah, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, so it did came out from some customers. I know that they wanted to say that this subgraph provides the source of truth for like the commons and whatnot, right? Because right now we follow the logic there is like, yeah, we capture everything and we find the one that's the most common thing there, but folks did want to say explicitly, yeah, this is the one that comes in. And like, if you follow the Fed one model, as Steven was saying, they have an owner of it, right? That this is the source of truth for it. But if you have it distributed that, then it's kind of harder to reason about. And let's say you have a shared library that you use to define those types, right? And you update the version of this library with a new, better description or something like that. And it's kind of like, you have 10 graphs running old version of library, one using the new one, but so the old one was gonna win, even though it may not be necessarily true, but it's that was an ask from someone. I don't remember who it was, but someone was asking for something like that.
Yeah, we have similar asks from the community, that ask for kind of an ownership model, but it's very difficult to get this one right. It's actually not that you have a single boss type. Maybe it's even that you want to say this is shareable, but this is where you should get all the definitions from. Like this field maybe is shareable important.
I think actually Wondergraph.
Yeah, we may need them
Directives
important. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think the
I think we need
Wondergraph
we need
actually did
directives on directives, and then we can use important on a directive.
I'm getting there. That is another discussion. But yeah, it's I don't know if it's worth doing these things, but there is maybe a place for saying use this if it has a description, because like this team is actually it's difficult to say.
Canonical or something
Yeah.
might be the term, but yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we could influence the merging for these kinds of things. And then you could also have like schema evolution tooling around that and say, actually, you cannot deprecate it because you have no authority over this field. Not sure. Okay, maybe we let that simmer. Last first to prize. Okay, then that leads actually to a second thing we are at the moment solving in Fusion, which Apollo already solved with the directive merging, which is compose directive, which we also at some point want to solve here, right? Which is directive merging. And there are actually two kinds of directives, and they can also intersect, right? We have executable directives, and we have type system directives. For executable directives, this, by the way, is the second point that I had. The executable directives kind of are just merged, as I understood it. You don't have to explicitly declare them, or you declare them with a link that they are the same across subgraphs, but then they just work. But it's also difficult to, because I think you have to have them everywhere in Apollo, right? Because like an executable directives, you could just put anywhere and they would be sent to any subgraph when you split up the operation. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, the executable directive
Yeah.
needs to be the subgraph.
And then you have the compose directive, which is a type system directive, which you have to explicitly say that you want to compose it. But going back to the executable directive, it's basically by saying, by declaring the link that this directive is semantically the same across source schemas, that they are suddenly there.
I think it's just by if they all have the same matching definitions, they just get exposed. You don't do a link on executable directives.
As far as the doc says, you basically
For the
declare them.
for the compose directives, yes, you have to do a links and import them and define have a matching definitions and whatnot. But so this one is just for the type system directive for at compose.
Yeah, it was a bit diffuse explained. I was just wondering if you introduce a new source, like you couldn't introduce then a new subgraph that doesn't have this executable directive in there, it would just fail, right? Let me just go on a compose directive, and that has actually a link to this guy here. Only if all of the following conditions, yeah. Directive is defined in all subgraphs. The directive is defined identically in all subgraphs. The directive is not a compose directive. What happens if you introduce a new subgraph that doesn't have that? Does it vanish from everywhere?
Position failure, right?
But it's
Yes.
only
well, not the failure, but it's a change to the composition, right? So that could impact in the checks. It should show that you're no longer going to have that, I assume. But yes, it would disappear from the composed supergraph.
Yeah, it's kind of like surprising element, right? You maybe have just by accident two equal directives in two subgraphs. You bring in the third, it vanishes again. And just because it aligns, it's there. Why didn't you put that in the compose directives?
Oh, for the history there. Why this is separate from closed directive? Sorry, is that what the?
Yeah.
Question?
Why is this not also in the compose directive?
So, executable directive merging is something I think we just had for a while before we even had the concept of compose directive, and I think compose directive was more about the problem of people wanted to get metadata into their supergraphs that wasn't necessarily needed as part of querying, per se. Like executable directives you actually see in your schema, right? Or you see a client can actually see your executable directives, right?
Yeah.
They can use them, right? And that's not necessarily so much the case about ones that are like type system directives. where technically you don't really need them per se to be in the supergraph unless you have some like plugin that needs to see it or something, or you know you want it to be exposed for one reason or another. So I think they just came on as an came on afterwards.
Okay, but like in general, like for composite schemas, do we want to have it consistent? Like that you always have to kind of say, like, put this directive in here. And if it's an executable directive, then it must be declared everywhere, for instance. But it kind of makes it more declarative. Not surprising that it would come in.
So we're talking about being explicit or having
Being
more
explicit around this thing.
Yeah.
The second thing that I have there is, do we want to go for, like, it's a bit abandoned, but it's such a small change to the spec to have directives on directives. Like, actually quickly go for the.
I mean, it might be a
Composite.
small change to the spec, but it's still a dependency we would be taking on in order to actually get it in a release spec version and in every implementation out there is.
Yeah, no, it's a small spec change. It has a major effect on the ecosystem because paths and stuff like that. I agree. And if we do it, we might still need to have an alternative solution for legacy schemas. But like, this is 2 lines of spec code. It's also fairly simple to implement. And then you have actually metadata on directives, right? You could do this also for directive deprecation and stuff like that. There's a lot of interesting possibilities that this would open up, and it would also make this compose directive a bit nicer.
So you're saying
Yeah,
it's
I've added an example and that shows the difference between the compose and the other one. So if you scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's a small change for the spec, but
Yeah.
a huge change for the ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean it's always when you have to touch the parser, it's always a major impact. But it would allow us metadata on metadata. Metadata on direct.
It sounds like the moon landing would be one for the Apollo guys, I guess. You know, small change in the spec, but a huge change for the ecosystem.
I don't know if we want to tie this dependency. There are other things we also want to have, like directional enums and stuff like that. But is there any appetite for doing this, or rather not?
Let's say if we don't do this, then should we follow Nemo? In my opinion, not. Like there's this second use case of Apollo when you have all directives applied and the definition is the same. Then it's passed through. But the problem is like when you change the location in one, then it's done, right? It will get so this one we shouldn't follow. So then if we don't do this, then we don't have really a solution for directives, right?
Yeah, we could also, like, this would mainly be we find a native nice way to do that, right? Otherwise, like for directives in general, we can still put it here, right? We could still say we have here compose directive. I don't know the syntax, but let's say it's name, and we have here add foo as the directives that we want to put into the composition. I would, if we introduce that in this way, I would still go for also the executable directives should be declared explicitly. Like if bar is executable.
I mean, is there a reason, and not reason, like a difference from the schema side if directive is executable or not? I mean, you need to have it on the schema anyway, right? So if we have one way to pass the directive and like compose it into the public schema, however we call it, then it should apply to both, no?
You don't have those in true introspection, right? You don't have directives there, so you need to know your schema with the directives. So your what do we call it? API schema has to include those executable directives, right?
No. So executable directives are in the introspection. What's not in the introspection is type system directive.
Yeah,
so see,
what I mean is,
because they're not attached to anything. So yeah, so you have a list of directives. Yeah, never mind.
what I mean mostly is like you need, like the main use case that I see that people do with Compose Directive is to use those directives in plugins on the router or / gateway meta. So it's like metadata for people most of the time.
So do they want to, but then there's another question. Do they use it to get this onto the supergraph schema?
Yeah.
Or do they use it to have it actually on the public API?
Oh, they just need a way on the gateway / router, whatever, to extract those. And let's say they need to have it like for authentication purpose or some extra validations and stuff. So they need to have this data. And in case of like Apollo or other gateways, the only way to actually provide it is through the supergraph. That's why they use the compose directive.
But in this case, actually, it would even be better to have like also the scope. Like I want to compose it, but I want to compose it into the supergraph, not into the public API.
But what's the difference? Like if the gateway has no idea what the directive is doing, like you have lowercase, right? Then you need to have some logic on the gateway that actually performs this lowercase or at the subgraph, but then you don't really need to like.
No. What I understood, what you said is that people have like something maybe on here.
Yeah, it's just metadata that you can like
passing or whatever.
Yeah.
And the gateway will inspect this, maybe on query planning or whatever, and say, okay, I found this directive. I'm going to do this with it, with the plugin, right?
I mean, not necessary to parse int, but like
yeah, whatever. It's just give me a better
metadata. So it could be like authenticated or
okay.
You know.
Yeah. Okay. Let's use this much better. Okay. Yeah, but in this case, like this is the information for the gateway and for the gateway plugin, right?
Yeah.
Why should this be exposed to the end user?
It's not. What I'm saying is like they need a way to compose it into whatever format the gateway is using so they can read it. But in order to have it there, you either implement it in a spec or on top of a spec.
So they take it out again?
Sorry?
So they take it out again at the gateway.
So the AP, so that's why we have the supergraph schema, which
Yeah.
has all extra metadata around how stuff is being joined.
Yeah.
And right. And then there's the public API schema, which is just your GraphQL APIs that customers interact with. The compose directives are not in the public API schema. They're only in the supergraph schema.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no way to expose actually metadata to the user.
To the client, no.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve that problem. This is mainly for communicating information to people's plugins.
And as Camille said, it's mostly just metadata. So adding additional information about who's the owner of the service, and they do some logging or some metrics around that.
Yeah, I was thinking, so in Fusion, for instance, we use that like we don't have compose directive. You basically specify which directives you want to have in the public API. And we use that, for instance, for semantic non-null for relay. If you want to instrument relay with semantic nullability, you basically annotate the schema. And then you can feed that into the relay compiler, and it knows actually where semantic nullability exists. I think the Apollo Kotlin plugin also uses that, right?
Oh, so that is an interesting case because the semantic non-null, right? You do require a full schema of all the type system directives, right?
Exactly.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. So the way we do that is we always have a schema route that people can circumvent the introspection, just because the introspection there is a proposal that GraphQL Java and also we implement with the that you can also introspect directives, but it's not really standard. So we decided to also have always a schema route, and then clients like Kotlin, Apollo Kotlin, or Relay can just download it there. And that was more how I thought. I never thought about plugins in this way, that you feed with compose directive, just basically gateway plugins. Oh, he's not talking to us. Yeah, but then, like in Apollo Federation, we don't have really control over what a directive will do. Like you can compose it, then it goes into the supergraph, or it's by accident executable and available everywhere. Then it's in the schema, and you can also use it in the query. But there is no way to control in which layer the directive should be, and also if it should be exposed or not, right?
Yeah, they're different, sort of different, thought as different purposes. So I guess they follow different paths currently in Apollo's code base. So the executable ones, they have to be available everywhere for them to actually appear up. And I think that takes an intersection of the locations and whatnot. So there's some flexibility there, but so I don't think it errors out explicitly when you like the example you brought earlier when the subgraph is added. I think it just disappears from your API schema, and then you're supposed to catch it using studio checks to notice that the directive is gone when you look at the diff. That's the intended way of catching that, I think. But yeah.
But shall we like have a pimped version of this that covers more use case, where you can say that like I want this directive is intended for the public API, so compose it fully, or compose it for the subgraph, and then use it for both cases, like executable. Like don't make a difference between directives. Just say, okay, you can compose it and you can define in which level this should go, and then we can have also proper composition errors around this.
So the follow-up question would be, do we need to distinguish where they should end up? So it's kind of like if the user tells us, yeah, I want to compose this directive into the supergraph, right? Should it be applied in both the supergraph, and should the API schema, what we call API schema, should that also include that information? Because I think some folks were asking for that as well. I just don't remember the details, but right now,
Yeah,
right now it's just the supergraph for the compose and executable ones for the API, but it's argument could be made that maybe it should be propagated to the API schema as well. I like your semantic non-null thing, but yeah, that's a good example of how folks would actually want to have it on API schema.
Yeah, the main reason I see for this is like authorization and authenticate is wrong. Authorized. Yeah, you have an authorization directive, for instance, here that you write a plugin around. Then this should not end up as metadata on the actual schema that you publish to the world. It should actually be just internal detail for the gateway to do stuff with. Whereas semantic non-null, for instance, things like that, you want to expose so clients can take advantage of it. There could also be other use cases. Maybe people have for input types certain validation, I don't know, validation metadata, so clients can show stuff nicely. There are a couple of use cases where you want to have it in the public API and where you don't want it to have to appear there, but you want it in the supergraph.
Yeah, I feel like if we do the composition, the directives, it needs to be like a way to decide whether it's exposed or not, like for sure, because yeah.
Well, so the question, Michael, for you would be, okay, so if we do make that distinction that you only show it in some cases but not all, like so target supergraph versus API schema or something, right? How, if you have a single server, right, and you declare it on your type system there, the authorized is going to be in your schema, right? So this is it would, from that sort of perspective, right? Why would you need to actually hide it into your supergraphs? I guess it's better security for the gateways, and I agree with that. It's just it's a different behavior there, right?
Why you need to hide it in
Well,
your...
we kind of already have two schemas, never mind. So
Yeah.
it's kind of that already gives it, sure. Because like if you have a server, right? If single server, if you add authorized, that's in your SDL there, right?
Yeah.
So you probably don't
Could be.
publish another one
Yeah.
server, like filter it out one for the clients. You just use that one, I guess. But
Yeah, but the argument there is that actually a subgraph
yeah,
can have information and it can have a schema that you wouldn't expose to the outside. So the subgraph is only accessible by the gateway, right? You wouldn't let people inspect all your subgraphs. So that means you can have implementation details on there because it's hidden technically. It's also in the Apollo case, you wouldn't want people to directly use the entity field, right? And then this could also lead to more control over putting directives in. Like shows at least the intent. I want to put these things in, and only if all of these subgraphs have an executable directive marked as compose directive, it would show up. But this has still issues. I mean, this needs to be worked more on, but in general.
but for the executable directives, you still would need to have it declared everywhere, right? Because otherwise, you would have to ensure that whatever you send out in your queries, right, can hit the server to actually understand it, right? Or
Yes.
we would
I
not.
mean, you could also decide to ignore it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want consistency, yes, the executable directive in the end has to be everywhere. But we could then work with errors better and not just remove it. Like there's the main thing I see is that it's more explicit. It would not fundamentally change what is there. It would just give you more control of where it appears, and then also kind of is making a statement. I want this in, and I want it in there.
I do like explicit versus implicit. I do like the intent to be explicit, but yeah.
Okay, I'll probably draft a bit. I'll probably write an RFC on that, then we can see if that fits in.
Well, the follow-up question of those would be, for stuff around, well, the simplest use case would be how you merge those is like you follow a strict rules. They have to be compatible with each other or whatnot, right? But federation directives do not necessarily follow those rules. There's different merge strategies for different directives.
Yeah, but these are system federation directives, right?
Yeah. Yes. So like for this one, like for I guess for the custom directives by the user, we expect them to have the same one. But but even like so example of custom authorization, right? So we do have our own directives for authorization and federation, right? But if a user creates a custom authorized or requires JWT scopes or something, right? Whatever, right?
Mhm.
Something. How you apply those things together that's actually across the subgraphs, it can be, confusing. But I guess it
Yeah.
could be a limitation of custom directives that you have to match. That's about it.
Yeah, we actually talked about that also internally. It's like, you could put it over the top and have merge, like you could have a couple of merge rules that you could apply. It's also like, what do you do in general? I mean, this is also another problem. And I don't know what Apollo does in this case, right? Let's say authorized is a non-repeatable directive. And you have this non-repeatable directive on name with different values, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's a user. What do you do then?
If I remember correctly, I think it errors out when they're different. And it's repeatable. But I'm not 100% sure on it, honestly. But it should at
Okay.
least
Yeah.
yeah, if you try to compose a non-repeatable directive and they have different values and different subgraphs, it should be an error.
Okay. But that's also interesting because in case of something deprecated, you would just take the first field possible, the first reason.
Right. So this goes back to is we don't know anything about the user's use case and whether it's fine to ignore, but when deprecated,
Yeah.
not the worst. So it's a question of knowledge in terms of what composition knows about the directive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so like if it's a built-in directive, we do merge it according to specific rules. But if it's a custom one, yes, it's gonna have that.
yeah, but this could, for instance, be a pre-packaged. But I mean that also makes the whole use case for custom directives more complex. And I don't know if it's worth doing that. If the use case area is large enough to have an investment in there, you could also have here the merge rule, like say, okay, first one wins, or like with deprecated, right? Just metadata, or in the case of authorized, must be equal, or
I think that would be getting pretty complex very fast.
yeah.
Because the merge rules can be like pretty much anything, right? So
yeah.
That I think enforcing a strict matching, if it's not repeatable, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I will flesh something out, and then I propose something around this, and then you guys can decide. Because at the moment we have nothing, not about executable directives, and also nothing around type system directives. But if we go this way, like, do we want to, like, the directive? And then let's say we have the authorize here. Authorize on field definition. No, I don't wanna. Do we want this? Or do we want the legacy style? I mean, not legacy style. This is not even the core spec. But
I
it
do
would
like
be more
I do like directives on directives. It's just that this is a change to the spec, and I have my doubts how fast it can actually make it to a spec.
like the thing I like about this, or why I even started thinking about it, is that it puts everything in one line. So this is a directive, and we have, like with shareable and stuff, we have it on the object that we are talking about, right? And the distance from this thing could be huge, right? In a larger schema, they might be far apart. Okay, awesome. Anybody else have something? Otherwise, we can conclude. And see each other next week. Goodbye.
Bye.